We've been talking, we've been sort of, Marcelo Kennedy has been driving us around all day to different book signings, which has been really an amazing day. And we've seen, it's been quite an experience. So tonight, I thought we planned something a little bit differently, and I thought I would just kind of see like what your, how many, has anybody picked up the book yet? Has anybody here read it? Okay, cool.
75%.
75%. And you still showed up.
I did.
Yeah, cool. That's pretty good. And you're still my friend, so that's cool. You know, the funny thing is like the unexpected consequence of writing the book. This has been 4 years plus in the making, and it was something when I stumbled upon the core ideas that I'm exploring in here. What happened was that I stumbled upon them about 6 years ago, or 6 or 7 years ago, and it really scared me because I'm like, nobody's going to want to hear this. It was completely unexpected, and so what I've decided to do is I just began to put down what I sort of would call skills with which, or frames with which to look at life, and help you to disintegrate the frames that hold us in prison. That's kind of my general idea. So it's a course in freedom as opposed to a course in prison. And the idea mainly being like, how can we break the frames, and we all have them, a frame or a mythology or a belief system that holds us captive. That's the general idea. So we all have them. We have them around sex and money and relationships and yada, 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 yada. But those are the top three. I mean, generally when I'm on the phone with somebody, they're like, I don't think anybody else has this problem. What's it about? My relationship. So, you know, these are the top things. So you start to see these themes over the years. I've been doing sessions and workshops. I did my first meditation workshop when I was 10. And it was like, you know, I've just been on my path. I've been looking at things. I've been interested in things. I've been diving into things. I was the person who, when the teacher said, okay, this is what you have to do, I did it. They said, well, no, you got to do it like this and this and this. I did it. Get up at 4:01, not 4:02. Okay. At 4:02, do this and do that. I did that. And I did that in different systems and different ideas and different philosophies for years and years and years and years. And then about 15 years ago, I said, enough looking outside. Let me go see what's going on inside. Let me go find out what's going on for myself. And that began this path. And it was a strange, sort of Mr. Toad's wild ride, because it went in all these unexpected directions, because I was no longer taking my advice from what was out there and what the book said and what was supposed to happen. I was taking my advice and my cues from inside. And then about 6 years ago, I was in Sedona, and Sedona, Vortexville. We also call it Vortexville, or Slowtown. And I had this amazing insight. I spent 2 weeks, in essence, communicating with my own brain. You know, and this was like weird. I mean, who knew that? I was like, what, this is just going to be weird. This is just going to be strange. I mean, how am I going to tell somebody? Oh, yeah, well, I was hanging out and started talking to my brain. People were like, yeah, sure. But what was so cool about it was that I had this insight about consciousness, and that if I were to really understand consciousness, I needed to know the organ that was at least hosting or manipulating or using consciousness to be conscious. It's sort of like, you know, I guess investigating your car. You know, you use it, but you don't really think about it. But one day you just go, well, what is this thing? Open up the hood and start poking around, and the only surprise was that the brain began communicating to me. The car did not. So actually, so when I hooked it up to the computer, it did. But that's a different story, and a different workshop. So I was hanging out, talking, like sort of just beginning to communicate with the brain. It was weird. I mean, it was a very rudimentary communication to begin with. And that was the key realization. I realized that there were many parts of the brain operating and functioning completely unconsciously, like outside of my conscious awareness. But we're conscious. We're like conscious. We're conscious. Hey man, you're conscious, right? Everybody's conscious. We're conscious beings, consciously recycling, consciously doing things. So it just seemed weird that I would like to get to know the brain. But that's where it began. And I realized the insight with that was it's like your digestive tract. You don't really know what's happening, and yet right now everybody's in a various stage of digestion. But you're not really particularly conscious of it. And our brain, as it turns out, works in the similar way. And the question that started me on that is, why do some things change and why do other things not change? That was sort of the beginning. So because that was the question, why do things not change? I want it to change. My conscious mind wants it to change. I know I want to change. And yet, there was something in resistance to that, or something pulling in the opposite direction, or something not changing, when I, yet consciously in every part of the thing that I had control of, was saying, I want to change. This was the question. This was the investigation. What is it that doesn't change? So the book came out of that key insight, and I started just hanging out with the brain. And it was the weirdest thing, because when I finally got the general idea, it was not like having a discussion like, hey, what's going on? And somebody talk to me. It was more like I began to get these little symbols or images or little insights. And so over the course of 2 weeks, I just sat maybe you would approach a small animal, or like you might approach a little deer or something. You walk very, very slowly. And that's what I did, just very gently approaching. Okay, well, tell me. I want to know about what is some of these processes that are going on. And so this 2-week communication occurred about sort of the symbolic nature of the brain, the languages that are being spoken. And the key insight was that there are lots of different structures in the brain, each communicating in a different language and not intercommunicating all that well. That was the main aha. So then it began to make sense. This is why I want to change the thing that's walking around going, hey, I'm Lawrence. That thing wanted to change, but there was something inside, a substructure, something much more limbic, something much more animal, something that was not changing. Because no matter what I said to it, it didn't understand English. It wasn't like you go, hey, what's happening? It doesn't speak language. But what I did discover is it speaks in symbols. And this began to be the key insight. Now, what is a symbol? Well, I would ask you to look around this room and find something that is not a symbol. And it turns out that pretty much, just take this, what is this? This is a symbol. It's art, but it is a symbol. It is a representation of an inner experience put out on canvas. What is the statuesque head over there? It is an inner idea carved into stone.
The wall.
Well, the wall is an idea about space. It's about a division of space. It's symbolic and practical, a division of this space from that space. Right, the table, the chair. Okay, we're going to do something and sit on it. Well, this could be a rock, but it's not a rock. It's shapes. There are shapes here. There are decisions being made. It turns out that pretty much everything you see, everything you're wearing, the decisions you're making, the shoes you're wearing, why are you wearing this thing over that thing? These are all symbolic things. And it turns out that that deep part of the brain deeply understands the symbolic nature of life. That was the insight. So once, it was weird because in an instant, life turned into symbols. I began to see, everything, literally. I'm just looking at this vitamin water thing over there. Those are symbols. Those aren't actual big bottles. Right? These are pictures. They're images. There's something that you understand. Ooh, color. Ooh, good. Chakra colors. You know, and there's something that says vitamins. Oh, these are all symbolic things speaking to other than conscious parts of our mind. And so that's what I just began to sit with. And then that led me to sort of this aha, which I've written about in the book, which is, wow, all life is symbolic. Well, then that gets into the gray area of, okay, well, what does that mean? What if all life is symbolic? So my brain is communicating in symbols. I understand who I am. How? Somebody think of, what were you doing when you were 3 on your birthday?
3 years old on Thursday.
Well, the point being, thinking about yourself at 3, you have to reference a symbol. Think about what you had for lunch yesterday. Lunch doesn't magically appear, right? You're referencing like, oh, wait, let me go scan it. You reference a symbol. You get the general idea there? So all of a sudden I started to realize, well, everything is symbolic. But this is a very scary, that was sort of like jumping off, you know, my dad is here and we once went to Acapulco, and in Acapulco they have cliff divers. You know, that's the equivalent of jumping off the cliff into the rocky ocean. All life is symbolic. Everything that I know about myself that I reference is symbolic. That was it. I was like, okay, this is a 2-year free fall. And I'm the kind of person like, you know, I'll talk about it a little bit. If the response is cool, you know, good. If it's warm, I'll move ahead. But most of the time people go, that's insane. What do you mean all life is symbolic? Hey. So, yes.
You know, symbolic is like, I'm not comfortable with the word. How about context? It's the same.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Well, symbolic is very hard to be with.
Exactly. Case in point.
But context is
Yes.
easier.
Context.
We all can get context, but when you can get symbolic, you know.
So, the taking giving that, adding to that, so that's good, like the context, i.e. the frame, the symbol, the thing that gives you a sense of who I am is in fact, has a contextual or symbolic or framework around it. And so off I go diving into the cliff, and then the last 7 years has been about really understanding the depth of that insight and how seamless it is. And that's what kind of blows really sort of blows things out, is the seamless nature of the transition of symbols or the transitions of frames or contexts. So you can be sitting here having a discussion and there's a loud noise and everybody's all on hyper alert, and suddenly the mood has changed. And what happened is that one brain state switched. So your food moved from the stomach to the small intestine. You didn't know it, and you don't know it when that happens. It just moves, and then suddenly your mood's a little bit different. Things are a little bit, oh wow, I didn't know. Well, what happened? This hyper alert part of the brain comes online, and it starts communicating in symbols. So I was leading a workshop in July in Sedona, and I walked into the room and there was an orange blow-up raft that somebody was lying on, and they just had it propped up against the wall, and all of a sudden, boop, hyper alert. What is that? But see, I've been developing this thing of like, okay, I feel some sort of change in my body, in either my breath or my tension, or something happens, and that's what happened. And I'm like, well, what's going on? So I sat and in front of the group sort of processed the symbolic communication of what that raft meant to me. I had no idea. I just felt the pulse change. I felt kind of a little clamminess on my skin, and I knew something had happened. Some part of me responded to an orange raft in Sedona, where there's no limited water supply. So I'm like, okay, well, let's sit here. So as it turns out, I had to me, when I followed it, I just traced it, and it turns out there, in fact, was an experience of when I was 2 and a raft. And this sense of life and death that had happened as I was floating down a river and not with the strength to paddle myself. This is happening all the time. So why some things change and why things don't is because certain parts of the brain they have no direct experience. You know, there was a popular, like in What the Bleep, which was very popular, one of the statements was, well, the eyes do not see, the brain does. That's right. The brain is doing the seeing. The brain is doing the weaving. The brain is doing the interpreting. And what is it interpreting through but symbols? Which leads me to what this talk was about and is about. In fact, I guess it is and is now. If I were sitting in traffic, it would be maybe, sort of not. So, the talk was intended to be the 4 buckets of mythology. And the idea was that out of this symbolic understanding, I began to see literally everything as symbols. So I'd be talking with somebody, and instead of hearing all their, be telling me their story, but basically that starts to see, oh, okay, there are these symbolic themes that keep repeating. And there are symbols and buckets, if you will, contexts, frames for literally everything that we do. And I'm beginning to work on a new book just really helping people see these sort of frames or buckets or contexts of mythology, i.e. the myths, the stories, the beliefs that we move through life as if they were fact, as if they were literal, but are not. They're nothing more than a bunch of symbols connected or woven together in our heads in these very complex neural nets. They're changeable. Yet we walk around and we'll see something in the head and go, oh, well, I can't change that. Well, why? Because our experience, said, well, you can't change that. It's a table. And so we see a table in our head and our experience says this, and so there's a sort of helpless way in which we approach the symbols in our head. To me, it's kind of like, I liken the symbols that our brain coughs up to be like walking into a restaurant and saying, oh, looking at the menu and saying, okay, well, I'd like the pasta primavera with a little this and a little that. And what you get is a bucket of dishwater. You're like, well, I didn't order the dishwater. Can you take that back? But that's not what we do. When the brain offers you the dishwater, you just go, oh, okay, can I get a straw? Oh, this is yummy. And then typically I'll get a call from somebody and they'll be like, man, I'm so unhappy. And I'm like, well, yeah, because the brain's dishwater that's what you're drinking. So part of what the idea of this book was to begin to lay out these insights. And to begin to lay them out in simple ways so that you can begin to grapple with them, because I'm tired of holding out. I've been holding this stuff for 7 years, so I'm like, okay, it's your problem now. You read it, you help me figure it out. So, because I guess the other huge sweeping broad realization upon realizing that all life is imagery based is that I realized, well, now I don't know anything. And I don't mean that in some kind of nice spiritual way. I really came to the realization, I'm like, wow, holy smokes. I mean, if this means that people 5,000 years ago could have been referencing a symbol in their head, thinking that it's real, writing about it, and starting a religion. Okay, this changes the equation. That was really scary. So part of the job, or part of what I wanted to share with you, is just one of the insights that came out of that, which I call the 4 buckets of mythology. Because what I started to see, there are these themes, and they repeat over and over again. Simple, repeatable, and so far I've only found 4 buckets. And I've been exploring this for about 4 years, so I would love to find a new one, maybe tonight. 5th bucket.
Last question. How does creativity fit inside of that?
Well, that's a beautiful question. So the question is, how does creativity fit inside of that? As it turns out, I found the place, as I was hanging with my brain during those 2 weeks, I found the place where people like Picasso and brilliant artists of our time, but specifically I found the place where Picasso, I could see that this guy sat down and had a smoke and a cup of coffee every day and went to this kind of place. You know, that you begin to realize that this is a reflection of an inner idea or insight put on canvas. That is the creativity. Creativity is coming from these vast, deep, beautiful places that are beyond language. You do not need your conscious mind to understand this. You don't need to let's say, there's a horizontal line with some purple and, that would not be a fun experience. And I've seen people do that. They're sometimes sitting at the museum and they're like, with these pained looks on their face. I'm like, yeah, relax, let's let the other parts take over. These come from deep places inside of us. So, coming back to the buckets of mythology, there are just basically these four little themes, and you'll see them over and over again. The creativity comes on how you make up all the stuff that goes around the four buckets, and there's ample creativity around that. How you doing? Welcome. I'll start from the beginning because I know you guys. You'll want to get
really
friends
embarrassed.
Yeah, I know it's okay. I'll just give you the short version. Symbols. Context. Okay. So basically now we come to the four buckets. So any questions? I'm going to take questions after, but I just wanted are we okay so far? Anybody need? So, in a nutshell, there are symbolic themes. They appear over and over again. You talk to your friends. How you doing? Oh, my relationship, or my this, or my that, or financial situation. So there are those themes. We know those themes. There are themes of mythology. So I'm going to lay them on you. Fasten your seatbelts. Bucket number one. As represented by the envelope. Bucket one. Bucket one is a very simple, it's sort of the bucket of what I would sort of call the earth people of the earth, the tribal cultures. When I spent time in Africa, this was the bucket of the tribes that I was particularly staying with. And that bucket just basically says, all things are good, even the bad stuff. It's sort of a context of all things speak of Tuawe. All things speak of Unumate. All things, even the lightning storms, the destruction of the village, the problems of the things that happen, and they are part of the circle of life. Right, so the circle of life. We see those, that was the lion. I mean, that was a classic example of sort of the philosophy of bucket number one. So basically, life with its horror is to be embraced. Life with death is to be embraced. It's all to be embraced and lived with and grappled with, and there's an understanding and depending on the specific philosophy, there are nuances. All of these have nuances, but the basic thing is the age-old surfer word, hey, it's all good, man. So it all falls under the context of all things are good, even the bad stuff. Okay, and this is not so much those Native American teachings. It's some of the Buddhist teachings as we were talking about. It's kind of just that context. Now the second, so that's bucket one, and it applies, but most people's lives, they have some understanding of bucket one, but most of us spend our time in bucket two. Bucket two, to the front of the room, please. Bucket two. And bucket two is a simple bucket. And all it says, the context of bucket two just simply said, at one time, life was perfect. This is the bucket of perfection. This is what most people are freaked out about. Because there was once Eden. Everything was once perfect and beautiful. And then, what happened, my friend?
Oh, everything, blah, blah, blah.
Thank you. Everything happened. Eve handed off the apple. The world went upside down. There was a fight up in heaven, and this thing went that way, and that one went that way. Basically, things were once in a state of perfection, then they fell into disharmony, and now our job is to restore harmony and balance back to the planet, back to our lives, to get back to the oneness. This is basically the bucket of the struggle of good over evil. This is the general, also happens to be a general movie theme that you'll see over and over again. These are the themes. It's just the struggle of good over evil, the struggle to overcome. Okay, and this has a myriad, in fact, an infinite number of variations, creative variations, as a matter of fact, where it's like, okay, here's a version of bucket 2. You have the lower chakras. I make no joke, my friend. You have the lower chakras, and the lower chakras must be overcome to overcome the animal. And you must go to the heart, and from the heart into the consciousness of God. Bucket 2. Okay, and there are infinite variations of bucket 2. And I would be a hell of a lot richer and happier if I just walked around and said bucket 2. It's all just bucket 2. Life is bucket 2. But unfortunately, that fateful day 6 years ago, I was sitting there going, oh, shoot, it's not bucket 2, it's just symbolic. So now I got a problem. So I'm starting to see the symbols. I'm talking to people, I start to see these symbolic themes. Oh yeah. So I say, how you doing? Well, I'm good, except, I'm just really afraid of this, the aversion of the struggle of good and evil. I'm just afraid that that I'm going to, die in Armageddon, which is coming soon. 2012. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just getting a coffee. So that's an interesting thing. In fact, we were having a long conversation with somebody who's really freaked out about 2012. I'm like, don't worry about it. It's a symbolic image. And when you start to see these symbolic images, there's so many things in life that you could, so far we've only lost one person. I'm surprised. I lost 10 like the other day. So yeah, once it's like, okay. But that's why he said, don't take anything personal. I'm just making a point to help you kind of begin to see the context of mythology or the context of the frames or belief systems that we live in. So versions of bucket 2. Oh, that's it, you're out. Strip search. Okay. We're basically on our way to discovering this battle, the struggle of good over evil. So, the versions of this are also, the devil has control of the planet, and we got to get back to here, and everybody's in their own heart has to find that way. And it's just variations on the theme. It goes on and on and on and on. Okay, so struggle of good over evil. Life was once good, and our job is to restore it. Now here's where it gets interesting. Bucket 3. Bucket 3. Bucket 3 simply says, I figured it out, and it's my way or the highway. Okay? But I won't judge you. So there are these themes of like these ideas, sweeping, beautiful, broad spiritual realizations. Oh, it's not polite to judge. It's not right. It's not good. So I won't judge you, but if you don't do it my way, I'll kick your ass. And we have a version of that going on all over the planet, right? Bucket 3 just simply says, I got it worked out. I have the one true path. Y'all are all messed up because you don't have that path, but I'll save you. And if you do it my way, you get to restore the balance and go back to heaven. You don't do it my way, well, there might be a hot beer waiting for you. So people are, in this interesting struggle. So I got the way, and now I got to go and save people, right? So you have this collision. In fact, you have this classic collision of mythology. It's basically the exact same mythology. It's the exact same story. It's the exact same framework. Got a bunch of rules and laws. If I catch you picking up sticks on Saturday, that's it, but you're out. And it's like, oh, gee, okay. And then I have to do my part to, to spread the message. So that's bucket 3. And bucket 4 is simply the bucket of science. So there's this idea in science that, I'm scientific and I have a scientific approach, so I have no bias at all, which in itself is, of course, a bias. I mean, if you really think that you have no bias, that's a problem. So that's basically the themes, the 4 buckets of mythology, and you can, so far, I have yet to find anything that will not fit into those. The world problems revolve around bucket 2 and bucket 3. Your problems in your life are pain points of conflicting mythologies, conflicting organs, trying to find their way using the system that you either inherited or that you got, from mom and dad, or you get from school, or you get from religion, or whatever your system of inheritance is. And so we will go and we'll kill people, and hey, this is good and that's bad, and I've got the way, and if you don't do it my way, and that's the version, and that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. Now, what do I do with that realization? The main realization is not, the world is going to do what the world is going to do. Nobody cares about the buckets. You can't go, well, hey, man, your bucket 2 ain't me. That's not going to work. But what you can do is you can start to dismantle your own mythological structures. Right? You can begin to say, well, gee, I'm really messed up about this particular thing, whatever it is. So, like, let's pick an example, like one that I was dealing with recently. Okay, so there's a relationship, and there are these conflicting impulses within the relationship, and those are also in conflict with the meta inherited mythology that says, well, you have to, the only good way and true way and right way in a relationship, of course, is if you till death do you part. So now you've got a conflict because I've got sort of reality, 3-dimensional reality. You've got the context of your inherited mythological structure or religious structure, and you've got all the nuances of the impulses and the conflicting impulses within your body. And those are the pain points, those are the crisis points. Depending on how severe they get, will depend on how intense you're feeling that either in your body or in your psyche or within you. And these are all just they're essentially conflicting contexts, conflicting frames, conflicting mythological images, conflicting symbols that create these massive, and I do mean massive, and pretty much we could take anybody's pain point, sticking point, and you could find there is a collision, these tectonic plates of mythology. That is the essence of the realization. So now tying that all back to, yes?
Excuse me, I'm really outside of all of this, and I'm just wondering where the hell I'm at. I'm just wondering, could you speak in ordinary language in a way that such that you're talking to a child, and you want him to understand what you're trying to produce and what your intention is? I mean, I'm kind of weaving around in and out, and I have no way of grabbing onto what you're talking about. So I'm trying to get, what is he, when I walk out of here, what will I, let's see, left with?
Oh, my friend, we're still halfway here.
Well,
We're still on the trip.
I'm looking from an outsider,
Yes, I
and I'd like
understand.
to be more where you're at.
Yeah.
So somehow I'm lost in the
I understand.
language, and I'm lost in the ideas. So could you be like, just speak ordinary and speak common language?
I'll do my best. I mean, I grew up in New York City. I don't know how
So
ordinary.
set up a context
Yeah,
so I can be here.
I totally, I hear you. Yes.
Real briefly, perhaps, of the difference between bucket 3 and 4. Science is 4, and 3 is I know the way.
I've got the way, and I know the truth, and you don't.
And how's that different with 4?
So 4 is just I've got it's a frame of science. It just says I'm neutral, I'm unbiased, approaching anything. And I just find that we're not really neutral and unbiased about anything. So one might have a scientific framework. In other words, I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor.
There's something like 3 though, number 4. It's not like a doctor
Oh, I
say,
see, right.
you either take the medicine or you're gonna
No,
die.
no, it's just neutral. I'm neutral. I'm not. We see this in particle physics. There's evidence that if you look at a particle, it's a wave, and if you don't look at it, it's a particle. So the bias, you're viewing it actually influences your participation. It influences. It's kind of a nuanced thing. I don't really. But in essence, it's just saying it's not that I know the way. It's just saying I'm not biased. I'm a doctor. I went to Harvard Med School, so I'm not biased. But right, okay. But the truth is, of course, we are born. You inherit a system. You're biased. So the essence, to break it down very simply, is we come into the world, and you inherit whatever it is that your core beliefs are. You inherit your, what's right and what's wrong. And most of us don't travel enough. We haven't traveled. We haven't expanded our horizon. I mean, the average American lives within, I think what it is, within 5 miles of the place that they were born. So within 5 miles of the place that you're born, whatever your system is, whatever your framework is for dealing with life is hard, you suffer, and you die. That's all I'm talking about. That's all the
I'll tell
buckets.
you, I got you perfect.
Excellent.
We should continue.
I hope so. You can keep me on track. That's all right. So that's really all these are. The buckets are just ways of seeing what you inherited. So Joseph Campbell would say, he was being funny when he said this. He used to say, okay, well, what is? How would you say this? Let's see. What is religion? Well, religion is mythology. It's a bunch of stories about things that happened a long time ago that get handed down with a certain vigor. Okay, well, so how do I look at religion? And people go, how do I look at mythology? And people go, well, mythology is somebody else's religion. Right? It's easy to see. You look at people and go, man, you're flying a plane into a building so you can connect with virgins? What? To save against the what? Okay. But that's easy. You can look at things and you go, that's just weird. Wait a minute. You're gonna go strap a bomb, blow yourself up at a cafe to help those bad people, what? It's weird. You just look at each other and go, what? That's obvious. But if I start talking about your inherited system, it's a problem. And that's the thing. So part of it, the way I have been sort of stepping around that is teaching about the buckets. The buckets of mythology, because, it is crazy. We are just, over basically who's right, the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus? Well, I don't know. There's these tectonic wars going on right now. So, long story short, 75% through, you've gotten through some of the tough stuff. In the book, I talk extensively about just the simple frameworks and giving you tools to start to see those frameworks, those reference points, and start, hopefully, at some point, if it resonates with you. Trust me, I've read this book for 5 people. I'm surprised as many people are even here. I was okay, maybe 3 people, 5 people. I'm oh, okay, I was kind of thinking about this stuff. But I come to find out that there is a little wave of people that have been thinking about this stuff. And so that's what it's written for. There's lots of little tools, lots of little ways to begin looking at and negotiating your way through the pain points. Because I swear, this is the wildest part. Every single time you drop a mythology, Every single time, you were in this context, in this frame, in this like inherited thing. This is what mommy and daddy said about life. Life is hard work, and then you suffer, and then you die. And if you did it right, you get to go to heaven. Maybe. Depending on the other things you did. Right? So that's the general framework. Now, if I look at that and I go, well, whoa, wait a minute, what? I'm here? Oh, okay, well, this is bucket 2. The struggle for good over evil. Work hard, do good things, be a good person, and then you'll get the rules. Okay, so if you can start to dismantle that, because that may not be working for you. If it's working for you, you shouldn't be here. I mean, no, you can't be here. The coffee's great, books are great. But I'm just saying, it's like when your mythology stops working for you, that's what this stuff is about. That's what this book is written about. That was the insight of the symbolic nature of the mind, of the contextual nature of the brain. That's what it is. It's about when you're ready. Because most people, we're walking around like this. You're like, dude, what's up? I'm a this. This is what I am. This is my career. You're like, okay. And so I have the job sometimes of like, pushing people at the jaw and like trying not to get bit. And like, okay, see if you can put that down for a minute. Whatever it is. And so that's what A Course in Freedom is about. It's teaching you to begin to put down, to release that hard stuff. Because for the most part, mythologies, i.e. religious structures, were written for a different people with a different set of concerns in a different time. And we haven't updated them. We're just using the same stuff. We're still, we go to holidays where we're talking about things that happened 2,000 years ago or more. It's like, okay, well, how many people can remember what you had for dinner like a week ago? So we're talking about things. Did anybody ever play telephone? Shoot, you're at the same table. Like in the same room at the same time. And you go, hey, by the time it comes around, it's like, wow, that is not the thing that started out to be. And mythology is no different. So the part is beginning to extract yourself from the inherited mythology. Whatever you want to believe is, who cares? It doesn't matter. But that moment when that mythology starts to fail you, which they all will, they fail us because we live in an ever-expanding universe that is expanding infinitely. There is no system that can contain infinite expansion, infinitely expanding. What is that going to be? Well, it has to be, I've got to work that up. Bucket 3. And you have lots of people telling you, well, this is the way it is, and you have to do these steps in this way, or burn. Okay, that's not working for me anymore. Yes?
Well, bucket 1, which to my way of interpreting is just that. It's a way of looking upon all that it unfolds at every level of reality, including those that we have no sense of at all, as the unfoldment of spiritual energy.
Yeah.
And it can
And
be
it's-
seen from above and outside.
Absolutely.
So that's not true of bucket 1.
Well, bucket 1 is just another, all I'm saying is it's just another way of looking at things.
Right, but it's
It's
a
not
way
the
looking
way.
from above and beyond.
Absolutely.
The narrow, rigid, tyrannically oppressive
Exactly.
experience
Yeah.
systems that involve one ego being right over and above other egos who are wrong.
Absolutely. However, it can be also equally tyrannical, and that's the other side.
How so?
Because if you don't do the rules and laws of bucket 1 right, you get punished.